IKEA. I was going through my leather scraps over there. There's a stack about over 4 feet tall. Took 5 giant garbage bags to fill them up, and I put them on the curb. I had some serious leather working. 4-foot tall pile of. Should have thrown them out a few months ago, but I'm not a hoarder. Please don't ever let anybody accuse me of being a hoarder. I want to talk about Walter Russell. By the way, I found over there, I don't know how it made its way there because it's not a scrap. I can make a green alligator wallet if anybody wants one. It's the last piece of alligator. Not only is it the last piece of alligator I got, it's a really nice one. This is an elbow. This is right here is the bending part, so it's right here. Alligator elbow. And I actually stick it, the bending part where it actually bends naturally, is the central part of the so where the wallet bends is where it's been bending, you know. Isn't that neat, huh? I know, you probably don't think that's very exciting. By the way, if you found the digitized works of Walter Russell online, you're welcome, because I'm the guy that digitized them. People's like, you ever heard of Walter Russell? It's like, I digitized his works. They're out there because of me. I hadn't talked about Walter Russell for a while, but all of a sudden, everybody wanted me to talk about Walter Russell. You can look up Walter Russell's periodic table of the elements. He made a discovery, and none of you or me were taught about this in high school or college. We should have been. Instead of their standard Mendeleev table of the elements, hydrogen, helium, oxygen, platinum, gold, you know, it's like, well, that's great. You know, got the valences. You know, it's kind of nice and orderly. Well, Walter Russell discovered 6 elements. I think it was 6. Or was it 8? 6 elements before they were actually discovered, because he actually saw these harmonic octaves in the elements. And if you follow these octaves, there are these empty spots where an element should be, but they've not been yet discovered. Walter Russell accurately predicted that there'll be this element here, and it will have these properties because it fits in this empty spot on harmonic octaves of the elements. And how come we didn't talk about, it's the same reason why they didn't teach you about Nikola Tesla in high school. I remember in the class books, and I know it's still that way if you actually open up, there'd be this like 2 or 3 pages dedicated to Einstein. Which in German, by the way, means 1 stone, which is slang for fool. But they had like a half a paragraph or less than that. Here's a guy that invented basically everything. Not literally, basically everything compared to Einstein. Einstein didn't invent anything except a refrigerator. You got a half a paragraph to Tesla and 2 or 3 pages dedicated to Einstein. It's really funny, except it's not funny. I'd like to actually go through some quotes of Walter Russell. And by the way, somebody snuck out. They remained anonymous. 23 high-resolution drawings made in 1953 that Walter Russell did. Very detailed, colorful drawings. They snuck them out. They took high-resolution pictures. They snuck them out to me. And I started giving them out everywhere. And the people that actually sit like a duck on its egg nest on his works, they didn't like that at all. They decided they'd come after me. That was years and years ago. True story, by the way. And I even gave a lecture at the Science and Energy Conference in Hayden, Idaho, and some of the folks that control the estate of Walter Russell, they didn't like the fact that I was telling everybody that they came after me, because I was giving it away. You know, I believe in, and that's what Walter Russell would have wanted. And they protested vociferously in front of a crowd of people there at the conference. And I said, yeah, but you actually did do that. I said I was giving them out for free, and they harumphed me. It's like everything I said was true. That's a true story, by the way. Walter Russell is sculpting ability and artistry is really amazing. You should actually look up some of Walter Russell's sculptures. They're really, really quite fascinating. This is a quote from Walter Russell. "Nothing is more fantastical and a travesty of how nature works than is quantum theory. Its very basis has no relationship to reality," which is exactly correct. By the way, I pointed out the fact that Russell Nikola Tesla, the discoverer of same J.J. Thomson, said there's no such thing as an electron particle. And that's actually true. The phenomena, as J.J. Thomson accurately describes it, is one unit of dielectric induction. Walter Russell got about 85% of everything correct. He didn't get the diagrams of the toroidal magnetic field geometry and the hyperboloidal geometry correct, but he got really close. And he talks about a magnet having 4 poles, but it doesn't. I'd like to get to that in a minute here, but this is Walter Russell on the electron. To describe an electron as a negatively charged body is equivalent to saying that it is an expanding, contracting particle. There is no such condition in nature as a negative charge. I mean, I've talked about this before too. It's humorous and accurate and logical. There's no such thing as a negative throw. Like when you throw a ball up into the air, yee, and then it runs out of energy against gravity and it starts falling back to Earth. You would say as it starts falling back to Earth, that's not a negative throw. I mean, that's completely ludicrous. That's just the elongated parabola of the dissipation of the force that you actually imbued into the softball when you threw it up into the air. No such thing as a negative charge, nor are there negatively charged particles. Charge and discharge are opposite conditions, as filling and emptying, or compressing and expanding, are opposite conditions. Walter Russell, most of his works, and his 2 primary works, really the only ones worth reading. The best one is The Universal One, and the other one's A New Theory of the Universe, right? I should have remembered that. Those 2 works are the only ones really worth reading. I mean, he did write a lot, but a lot of his other writings, as far as, field theory and metaphysics and whatnot, they're... And he nowhere, I have a digital search engine for his works, he never ever defines the term field. He never does. So there are things that he didn't get, but that's okay. Nobody gets 100% of everything right. I strive for that myself, but there are no negatively charged particles in this universe. Negative electricity discharges while positive electricity charges. By the way, he basically kind of calls everything electricity. That's a huge fundamental mistake he makes. He never talks about the dielectric, and he never understood that the dielectric and the magnetic are the conjugate geometry of the entire universe. They are one and the same thing. He wouldn't say, we say ice floating in the water, but of course the ice is the water. And he talks about, he would just like say cold water, and that of course is accurate, but he didn't make the connection, and get some quotes and some diagrams of his on what he didn't get. But more importantly, since he's so really incredibly accurate, and his Universal One, everybody should read that. I mean, that's my top 10 list of things that someone growing up or even yourself should read. And once again, that book is out there because of me. You're welcome. Along with many thousands of other books that I happen to digitize. The negative depolarizing force functions in the opposite manner in direction to the positive polarizing force. There's a drawing associated with this. Power is rest. Motion is an expression of power. And I've talked about that endlessly. That's what people don't understand. People think power, which is rest, in motion is power, but it's not. It's the impotency of power. We see things moving and think that's power. Kinetic motion, force, discharge, which of course is always centrifugal and is always equal to force dissipation, or true energy dissipation, is a direct quote from Tesla, not Tesla, but Walter Russell in his diagram. Centripetal electricity must always, and he's referring to magnetism. And by the way, electricity, as Dollard accurately says, is not an autonomous field modality, which is not what Dollard said, but phi times psi equals Q in Planck of electrification. In short and simple terms, this means electricity is the hybrid consubstantiality of the dielectric and the magnetic working in unison as that which we call electricity. Electricity is not a thing in and of itself. Red light, as white light passes through a red filter, that red light is the consubstantiality, of course, of the filter and, of course, of the white light. Centripetal electricity must always be opposed to centrifugal electricity. They work together, never alone. And what he's really trying to say here, he gets it, but he doesn't get it. He's very, very close. He's talking about magnetism and dielectricity, but he calls them both electricity. They work together, never alone. Each gives to the other as they oppose each other until one becomes the other. This is extremely accurate. Magnetism, force dissipation, reverts back to the dielectric, and the dielectric loss of energy, which is innate, actually gives forth itself to the creation of magnetism. Magnetism is a centrifugal force and motion geometry, and the dielectric, of course, is the centripetal inertia and acceleration. And there is a specific field geometry that is a plane that sits at the lowest pressure mediation between the both, and this is what he calls east-west versus north-south. This is where Walter Russell gets the idea of a magnet having 4 poles. And where he gets this from, and you've seen hundreds of ferrocell videos that I've made, the actual magnetism on any magnet is on the centrifugal edge and of course creates the toroidal geometry. The black holes in the center are the dielectric portals where the centripetal dissipation of magnetism reincorporates itself at the nexus or the null point, i.e. rest. At the center of every magnet there is the rest point where there is no magnetism. At the center of every vector of gravity, of course, there is no gravity. That, of course, is the rest node. I mean, nature really does explain herself very well. It's that human beings are really bad at observing and really bad at understanding what is blatantly obvious to anybody with 2 eyes. Russell's static equator is what I refer to as the plane of inertia. He talks about, of course, Isaac Newton talks about, he wasn't hit on the head with an apple. He was occasioned by the fall of an apple, and then he goes into extrapolating about its gravity. I've actually attacked Sir Isaac Newton's laws, which are not actual laws, endlessly because they're quite inaccurate, and Walter Russell does the same very eloquently. He says, this is as true as the sun, of the suns as it is of the apple. He talks about energy dissipation. Every sun which is projected into space by one swing of polarity's pendulum has its mate in a black vacuous hole of equal potential on the other side of its wave axis, which is waiting to swallow it up when the pendulum reverses its swing. The same is true of the black hole on either side of the magnet, as you can see underneath the supercell. That would be the other swing of the pendulum. The bright white lines is constructive magnetism, where you see no light at all, is constructive dielectric. I mean, the swing of the pendulum in the case of force would be the, the bright toroidal ring around the edge, the centrifugal edge of the magnet, and the inverse swing, it'd be the black central portion of integrating centripetal dielectric. And of course, the same is mirrored on both sides. This is where Walter Russell gets the idea of a magnet having 4 poles. He's looking at the 2 centripetal holes and the 2 centrifugal toroidal force and motion vectors on either side of the magnet. But a magnet doesn't even have 2 poles, much less 4. Polarity is the equilibrium, and he refers to a seesaw, where you got a child on a seesaw. One actually kicks its heels up on a seesaw, and if they're weighted the same, swing back and forth along a central axis point. The central axis point in the case of the magnet, or the axial pin, is the plane of inertia, or the center of the magnet where there is no magnetic flux at all. All of this is very descriptive of the true mechanics of Mother Nature. He also goes on to say, Walter Russell, that when Newton was occasioned by the falling of an apple from the apple tree that he sat underneath, if he were able to sit there for long enough, which should basically be like a couple weeks or so, he would have seen the apple rise again as the apple decayed and the worms ate it, and the water, which is mostly what makes up the apple, gasified. He would see the apple shrink up and be eaten by the worm, but majority of it in the form of water would have dissipated back up again. So he's basically saying Newton should have completed that by saying that there's a complete and total fulcrum everywhere in the universe. What Newton was occasioned by the fall of the apple. If he were to wait long enough, he would have seen the apple rise again, which is 100% accurate and extremely descriptive as to natura naturans, or natural order, and the cosmic mechanics of the universe. Walter Russell's Universal 1, I recommend everybody to read it. It's very, very good. Walter Russell is the one guy who said that light doesn't travel. And he's exactly correct. Now, any superficial person reading that, like, well, this guy's crazy. He says light is not an emission and it doesn't travel. But he's exactly correct. Light is not an emission and it does not travel. Goes on to say, one part of the theory describes certain microscopic resonators embedded with, in particular, within particles of matter to make it vibrate. These are set in motion, according to a recent article in Scientific American, by light entering through holes which must be of the right size in every case to cause the vibration or release of these bundles of energy. Nothing could be more fantastic nor more of a travesty of how nature works, for the only cause of vibration is polarity. The only vibrations there are in nature are those that are interchanges between two opposites of polarity, which extend from a 0 plus to a minus 0. He's talking about the rebounding against the plane of inertia in the case of the magnetic field. These are the destination points between which motion oscillates in sequence of reverberations and reversals. The reversals are the pulse beats of nature, and of course he's talking about polarity. Nature generates matter from rings into spheres by way of the north-south poles. When he means north-south pole, he's talking about those black holes on either side of the magnet, the centripetal vortices where reintegration occurs and force and motion are dissipated and they actually return to rest. And the north-south pole would be, in the case of throwing a ball up in the air, which would be analogous to magnetism, when it actually reaches its energy dissipation, it starts to vector back towards the ground, and that would be centripetal. That would be what Walter Russell refers to as the north-south poles, i.e. the centripetal. Radiates back spheres back into rings by way of their equatorial east-west poles. By east-west, he means the plane of inertia between the magnetic fields. Also, too, the lowest pressure mediation between the centrifugal magnetic and the centripetal dielectric. In this manner, matter emerges from space to form moving bodies and is swallowed up by space to disappear into the stillness of their zero source. Stillness of their zero source is just Walter Russell's way of saying 0-point energy, plane of inertia, the ether, rest. You take your pick, it doesn't matter. This law was written to fit non-existent premises which are mistaken to presume to exist. A body cannot continue, he's talking about Isaac Newton and his crazy laws, a body cannot continue in its state of rest because bodies at rest do not exist in nature, which is exactly accurate. Anything we think that's rest, of course, is perpetual kinetic motion. I mean, every atom is a magnetodielectric dynamo spinning at a gazillion cycles a second, so that which we think is at rest sure as heck ain't at rest. This is basically what he's saying. Bodies are but waves in motion, and by bodies he means, of course, conglomerations of atoms which make up bodies and masses. When motion ceases, bodies cease to be. Totally accurate. One might as appropriately refer to sound being at rest in silence. For sound is matter in motion like all other bodies are in motion. Exactly correct. He is completely opposed to quantum. He's absolutely correct on this. By the way, here's a couple quotes from people that think are geniuses on quantum, by the way, okay? This is from Niels Bohr. Everything we call real is made up of things which cannot be real. Well, that's kind of accurate. Here's one from the professor of theoretical physics and fundamentally one of the priests of quantum itself, Leonard Susskind. This is a good one. When common sense and intuition fail, we, meaning the relativists, have had to create a new form of intuition. A new form of intuition. Yeah. I think this guy actually smokes one of these. A new form of intuition based upon abstract, unreal mathematics. When common sense fails, common sense never fails. When common sense fails, you're just not bright enough to see things. You're not wise enough. When common sense fails, we must create uncommon sense. Uncommon sense is a euphemism for wackadoodle, bombastic, ludicrous nutbaggery. Yeah, we would call that Jabberwocky Poppycock. You know, Jabberwocky poem? I don't know if you're familiar with the poem called Jabberwocky. Like, absolutely crazy nonsense that doesn't mirror nature. I call it Jabberwocky Poppycock. This guy is looked upon, you know, as the real genius of relativity and quantum. Huh? The more you see how strange nature behaves, the harder it is for us to make a model of it. That's Feynman. These people are... This is what Nikola Tesla meant by people that could think deeply, but could not think clearly. This is a quote from Walter Russell. "The atom is held together solely by fast motion around a point of rest, which is known as the center of gravity." You know this spiral arm galaxy, the Milky Way? It kind of all spirals around this void, this rest point. These people call it a black hole, but it's a supermass with no magnitude. Yeah, it's the same thing. You know, kind of the eye, you know, the black spot in the center, where there's, you know, the center of a supercell, you know, that black spot in the center there of the magnetic field. That big black spot in the center of every spiral arm galaxy, yeah, there's a giant black hole, yeah. It's kind of like a wheel, you know, the axis and the felly and the hub and the hole in the middle, and everything revolves around nothing, but not nothing, rather not a thing. Everything is revolving around not nothing, rather not a thing. That's a huge distinction without a difference, with a difference, excuse me. "The atom is held together solely by fast motion around a point of rest, which is known as the center of gravity. Nothing else than that." This is Walter Russell. "There are no nuclear particles at an atom's center." He's talking ultimately. Even, by the way, all free neutrons become protons spontaneously after 17 minutes. You can look that up. That means a so-called neutron is a phase modality of a proton. The geniuses of field theory all said there's no such thing as an electron particle. It's undeniable. There's no such thing as a charge-carrying particle. The principle of same, accurately defined by J.J. Thomson, is 1 unit of dielectric induction. There are no nuclear particles at the center of atoms. In fact, there are holes like the eye in a cyclone. Have you ever been in the eye of a hurricane? I've been in the eye of a hurricane twice, living in Florida. You know, you get this swirling winds, and it's just really dangerous and dramatic, and all of a sudden the eye passes over you, and it's calm and idyllic, and the sky is clear. Have you ever wondered, you know, the pressure polarity, and it is a pressure polarity. You get all this force in motion, and it's revolving around this super calm nothing. Except it's not nothing. It's rest, and rest is power. Human beings don't get that. They also can't wrap their mind around the fact that light's not an emission, it doesn't travel, it's not a wave-particle duality, it doesn't have a speed. That's actually the hysteresis of the medium. It's the rate of induction at which the disturbance occurs of a medium in the medium through the medium as against itself. People can't wrap their brain around that, and they can't wrap their brain around rest either. In fact, these are holes like the eye of a cyclone in every atom of the 0, 1, 2, and 3 groups. This is how he actually divides motion up, the 1, 2, 3 groups of Walter Russell. All motion, of course, is an attempt of electricity, thinking mind to concentrate and decentrate. You know, what's the opposite of concentration? That would be dilution. He calls it decentration, which is just another fancy way of saying dilution, by multiplying and dividing gravity. Just think about that. That's highly accurate. By multiplying and dividing gravity. This it cannot do, for gravity is unchangeable. Gravity is eternally at rest. Yeah, but a gravity is an anti-field. All field modalities are ether perturbation modalities, as I've told you for countless years. If all fields are ether perturbation modalities, gravity is not a field. Gravity is an anti-field. Well, if all fields are ether perturbation modalities, which is the opposite of rest, then the vector of rest, which is towards the lowest pressure mediation, i.e. gravity, is exactly what Walter Russell said. Gravity is eternally at rest. He really did get about 85% of everything right. He didn't get the correct geometry of the magnetic and the dielectric. He actually has it here as north-south and east-west. Well, his east-west is pretty accurate, but he's showing the negative image. That, his east-west, by the way, is centrifugal. He calls it negative electricity. Negative electricity is centrifugal. Positive electricity, he said, which is north-south, is centripetal. Well, it's not electricity, it's dielectricity. But he has them drawn inversely, so his diagrams on this are 100% inaccurate. But I still get what he's saying. If you took a negative image of the hyperboloid over here, he's drawing the hyperboloid as if it were the toroidal centrifugal geometry of the magnetic. But it's a negative image of this. The negative image of the hyperboloid is the torus. And his other diagram, which looks like two pyramids with their bases glued together, is 100% wrong. But I get why he does that, because he's talking about the plane of rest. I've said to you endlessly that a magnet doesn't have poles, it has the inverse of counter space. The inverse of counter space, of course, is centrifugal motion. This is the division between rest, and he uses the teeter-totter analogy over and over again in talking about this. But his works are worth reading, but really, since life is short, I'd only read definitely the Universal One and New Theory of the Universe as number 2. He never uses the word polarity in the Universal One, but he uses it like 200 times and explains same in his later book, New Theory of the Universe. He looks like Colonel Sanders, looked like Colonel Sanders. He had a vision. Nothing is known except through the modality of the knower. I highly recommend reading his work. Nikola Tesla said of Walter Russell, I think supposedly Russell sent his Universal One to Nikola Tesla, and Nikola Tesla replied back essentially that humanity isn't evolved enough yet, and that you should bury that work for 1,000 years or something like that. In other words, humanity doesn't have the intellectual prowess to read and consume your work, which is extremely high praise. This appears to be true, what Nikola Tesla said of his work when it was sent to him by Walter Russell, but his sculpting is beautiful. His artwork is beautiful. His drawings are very shaky. It was done in 1953. It looks like it was done with his hand was shaking, but 85% accuracy is extremely, extremely high praise. I mean, that's even a little bit more than Plotinus got. Now, Walter Russell doesn't really get into hardcore metaphysics anywhere. It's just not what he understood. He was given a vision that was not his own, and he interpreted it the best that he could, and he did a really good job at it. Anyway, I hope you like these videos. If you ever want to contact me, my information is in the link below in the description. Also, too, a donation link if you ever want to make one. Greatly appreciated, by the way. Lux e Veritas. Thanks for watching.